What's up everyone and welcome back to this YouTube channel. Today in this video we are going to talk about the array reduce method. In the previous video we talked about the array filter method and array map method. In this video we'll talk about the reduce method. So without wasting any more time, let's get right into this video. So let's suppose I have an array of numbers just like I have it here. And what I want to do is I want to get the sum of all of its elements. So to do that, I have defined a variable named sum here, and I have set its initial value to be 0. And then I'm running a for loop on the array. And at every iteration, I'm adding the element to my sum variable. And when the for loop ends, I can console log the sum. So if I run it, you can see I'm getting 66, which is exactly the sum of all these elements. So it's pretty straightforward, but there's a better way of doing this thing in JavaScript. So what we can do is we can get rid of all of this code and we can use the reduce array method to do the same thing for us. So the way we can do that is I can define const sum and set it equal to numbers dot reduce. And now we need to understand a few things here. This reduce method can take two arguments. The first one is going to be a callback function. It can be an anonymous function, an arrow function, or just a normal function. And the second argument is the initial value. So let's first define the anonymous function, which is going to be the callback function. And the second argument, let's set the initial value to be 0. And now let's look at this callback function. This callback function can take 4 arguments. The first one is the accumulator. If you don't know what an accumulator is, you can Google it, and it says a person or a thing that accumulates something. So in our case, the accumulating is accumulating the elements from the array and putting it to our sum variable, and at the end, it gives us all the sum of all the elements. So the second value is going to be the current element. And as the name suggests, is the current element in the current iteration. If we are at the iteration 1, then it's going to be 2. If we are at iteration 2, it's going to be 3. And if we are at the last iteration, the current element is going to be 57. And the third argument is going to be index. And this index, as the name suggests, is the index of the current element. And the fourth one is array. So now we can come inside this callback function, and the goal is to get the sum of all the elements of the array. So we can say return accumulator plus current element, just like this. And if we run it, you can see we get the same thing, 66, which is the sum of this array. So it worked perfectly. But if you are a little bit confused about what's happening behind the scenes, what you can do is you can paste this code snippet, and what it does is it's console logging every value at every iteration and displaying them in a nice looking table. So if we run it, you can see now we are getting a table as an output on every iteration. So you can see it. And in every iteration, we have these values. The accumulator is 0 in the first iteration. That was expected because the initial value that we set was 0. And the current element is saying that current element is 2 because we are in the iteration first, which means we are at the element numbers 1, which is at index 0, and its value is 2. If we come to the iteration number 2, you can see now the things start to change. The accumulator value is now 2. So that's because we added 2 in the first iteration to the accumulator. And the current element is 3. That's because we are in the second iteration, and the index is 1 because we are at the index 1. And similarly, it goes on till there are no elements left in the array, and we get this output, which is 66. So this is how it works behind the scenes. Also notice how this accumulator is 0 in the first iteration. If we change that, if we change the initial value and set it equal to 10, run the code again, come here, you can see now the value of the accumulator in the first iteration now is 10. If we change it to 100, run it again, you can see now it becomes 100 in the first iteration. And our sum will also change because now we have 100 instead of 0 as the initial value. So yeah, this is how all of this works. Let's look at another example now. Let's say I have an array and it's representing a shopping cart, you can see, and it has objects as elements, and each object has some properties like name, price, and quantity. And what I want to do is I want to get the total amount of money that I need to pay to the shopkeeper based on this shopping cart. So to do that, what we can do is we can say const total and set it equal to cart dot reduce. And in here, let's say this time we pass in an arrow function instead of an anonymous function, and we need to pass in the accumulator and the current item. And what we will do is we will return accumulator plus item dot price multiplied by item dot quantity. Because if I am buying two breads and the price of one bread is 2, the total price of the breads that I brought is going to be 2 multiplied by 2, which will be 4. So this is what I have done here. And if we run it, actually, I forgot to add the initial value. Let's add that as 0, run it. You can see I got 19, which is the grand total of this shopping cart. So yeah, you can now get a picture of how useful this method can be and why we use this in JavaScript. So now let's say we have a bit complicated example. It's the same example, but now this discount field has been added to our shopping cart, which is good for us as customers. But in terms of our program complexity, now things get a little more complicated. So now what we need to do is we need to do the same thing. We need to get the total of the cart, but we also now need to take this discount into consideration. So what we can do is we can say const total, set it equal to cart dot reduce, and the same thing again, accumulator comma item. And this time what we need to do inside this arrow function is we need to say return accumulator plus item dot price multiplied by item dot quantity. Have them in parentheses like this, and then multiplied by 100 minus item dot discount. That's how we calculate the discount divided by 100. So now if we run the code, let's see what we get. This I again forgot to add this initial value, which is 0. So run it again. You can see we get 21.45. So this is what we will be paying to the shopkeeper when we also take discount into consideration. It's actually not the same example because in the previous example we didn't add apples. This time I have added apple and its price is 10. So yeah, you should know that. So yeah, you can now see this reduce function is very, very helpful, and I can list out hundreds of examples where you can use this method and you will love it. So yeah, I think this is it for this video. I hope you learned something new from this video. If you did, give this video a thumbs up and subscribe to my channel. It keeps me motivated for creating more content like this. I'll see you in the next one. Till then, peace out.